everybody. Welcome to Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. And today we're going to be discussing medicine, science, and politics. Unfortunately, politics have entered into medicine and science where people that are really unqualified, such as the person who heads Health and Human Resources, start expressing their, quote, opinions without really having facts behind it, and certainly not having any degree in medicine. But on our show, we actually have the star of our show is a medical doctor, and you've seen him before, who's also board certified in internal medicine with a specialty also in infectious diseases. So with that, none other than Dr. Michael Patmos. Dr. Michael Patmos, I'm sure you've seen a lot of the politics, especially on LinkedIn, from the McFraud Foundation to other things out there, and people are buying into it. So I don't know what's going on out in America, but looks like we have the Pied Piper leading the kids to the road of perdition. But anyway, we'd like to hear your thoughts on what's going on in medicine.
Well, good morning, Nick. Good morning, Rick, and good morning to all the viewers. There's an echo going on here. Anyhow, that's better. Good morning to everyone. I'm Dr. Patmos. Yes, indeed, I am a board certified internal medicine physician. I also have added qualifications in infection control and hospital epidemiology, and I'm passionate about public health and doing the right thing for people. And today I want to focus in on where politics and politicians have excessively interfered with and intervened in medicine, not just to the detriment overall of our public health, or because their involvement is factually wrong and mistaken. But I want to focus on and end on a note about human rights. And I would ask every one of the viewers early on in this conversation, and then remember this for later on, how do you feel about human rights? Do humans have rights? Do people have rights? What are those rights? Who has rights and who doesn't? Or do all human beings share certain rights? I think that may sound familiar to you because there are some founding documents in the United States that said that all human beings share certain rights. Well, I want you to keep that in mind as we talk about this one area of medicine where politicians have overly intervened. Now, let's be fair. Politics and science and medicine have always had some overlap. There have always been topics and areas that were politically charged. It took a long time, for example, to legislate tobacco because that was a political thing. But the involvement in today's medicine and science by politicians is really off the charts. It's much more than it ever was in the past. Perfect example is just the other day, the President of the United States ordered the Food and Drug Administration and the CDC to change the vaccine schedule to mirror that of other countries. This is coming from a president who has no background in any of this. There's a reason why there is a difference between what they do in Denmark and what we do in the United States. It's not as great as you think of a difference, but there is a difference, and that has to do with the fact that Denmark has a comprehensive, integrated health system where everyone is covered and babies get care and don't go without treatment. In the United States, we don't have a well put together health system. Our non-system leaves people out and leaves people without care. So there's a difference why we need a different vaccination schedule than Denmark or other countries. And simply saying copy other countries is not scientific. That's an intrusion of a political agenda into a medical and scientific process. But I want to focus in today. There are so many examples of where Trump and the politicians have intervened wrongly. And I want to focus in on one with specific request that you think about the human being who's caught in the crosshairs here, a little sense of human rights. So it is Donald Trump has gone before the country. I believe he said this in a State of the Union address or some major address. There are only two genders, male and female. And the belief is out there among the Trump supporters that there are only two genders, male and female, and the gonads you're born with determine your gender or your sex, and there's no other way around it. That's all there is. Two genders, you're either male or you're female. That's the operative mindset that Trump and his team has put out there, and there are millions of Americans who believe this now. All you have to do is just look at Facebook or any other social media or talk to people, and you will hear people say this. Okay? For those of you who believe that there are two genders, you're either male or female, riddle me this. This is a true case. 19-year-old patient is brought in by her parents because their daughter has never had a menstrual period. Now, they had been to the doctor, and the doctor says, sometimes there's constitutional delay and she'll get her period eventually. Well, the child is now 19, no longer a child, and has never had a period. So the doctor brings the patient in, and on the outside, the patient looks female. This patient has breasts and has a vagina. But on closer examination, physical examination, there's something notable. The vagina is blind. What that means is there's no cervix, there's no uterus, there's no ovaries, there's no fallopian tubes. The patient had a blind vaginal pouch and breasts. And that was, so you might say, gee, this patient looks like a female. Well, further evaluation was done, and the team of physicians did a laparoscopic evaluation where they looked inside the abdomen and pelvis, and much to their surprise, no uterus, no ovaries, no fallopian tubes, but two well-formed, functioning testicles inside the abdomen. Now, testicles, for those of you who remember basic biology, produce a hormone called testosterone, which is a masculinizing hormone. How is it that this patient had testicles but had no secondary sexual characteristics consistent with being a man? This patient has no penis, no scrotum, internal testicles, a blind vagina, and breasts. So now all you people who believe, all you maggot folks who believe there's only two genders, what gender is this patient? Is this patient a male? After all, the patient had testicles. Those are gonads, and the gonads are of a male, but they're intra-abdominal. Or is this patient female? The patient has a vagina and breasts. You tell me, does a patient with a vagina and breast, but no penis and no scrotum, is that patient a female? Or is that patient with breasts and a vagina a male? After all, the patient has testicles. So is a patient with testicles, but no penis and scrotum, a vagina and breast, a male? Or is that a female? Tell me, what is the answer to that question? And before you run off and say, well, this is a freak of nature, this is 1 in a billion. No, it's not. This is an example of an intersex state, and it is estimated that about 2 to 3% of all humans have either intersex states or such differences in sexual development. So this is not that uncommon. There are tens of millions of Americans who live with some similar type of difference in sexual development. So on further evaluation, the patient had their chromosomes assessed and evaluated. And lo and behold, this patient was XY. So the patient had a chromosomal constitution of being X and Y being male, and indeed the patient has testicles. But the patient had no masculinization. How could this be? Well, if this is where you can't do this if you don't have the background, if you don't know biology, and especially if you don't know embryology, you have no business talking about this because you don't understand what I'm about to tell you. All humans are born, all humans at fertilization. When the spermatozoa fertilizes the ovum, at that moment, all humans are female. And in the first early days and weeks of gestation, the zygote, the fertilized ovum, becomes an embryo. And then the process of differentiation from the female state to the male state begins. If there is a Y chromosome. But it takes more than that. It takes more than just a chromosome. There's a cascade of complex molecular biology, receptors, chemical intermediaries, enzymes, so on and so forth, that have to work and kick in at the right time to cause this transformation from the female zygote into a differentiated adult child or a baby that's either XX female or XY male. That process is complicated and has multiple very complicated molecular biological steps, any one of which can go wrong. And when they do go wrong, that transformation from female to male can be interrupted, can be short-circuited, or cannot happen at all. Now, in the case that I described to you, the 19-year-old, that patient had what's called complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. In other words, the testosterone that the testicles, those intra-abdominal testicles were making, was not being recognized by the body. The body can't respond to it. So there's no masculinization. So this patient was genetically male, had gonads, but the gonads were producing testosterone, but it was not being, there's no effect of the testosterone. The patient was insensitive to the androgenic effects of the testosterone. That is not an uncommon condition. In fact, there is a very popular, that I strongly recommend, very popular person on Facebook named Jackie Green, who has this condition, congenital androgen insensitivity syndrome. And she talks a lot about what it was like to grow up with this and what happened to her. And I strongly recommend that you check out Jackie Green and listen to what she has to say. My point today is that I want you to imagine this is your child, or better yet, that this is you, that you are born with a vagina and breasts, but intra-abdominal testicles. And you're not one gender, you're both genders. And now, remember also that this transformation from female to male isn't just a physical transformation, it's also a neurodevelopmental transformation. People identify with psychologically and emotionally with a gender that's based in part upon this transformation that occurs in utero. So it is very possible that you could have a body that transforms partially in one direction, but a neurodevelopmental outlook on it that doesn't. So there can be discordance between how your brain perceives what you are and what you feel like and what your body says. Imagine the discomfort, the embarrassment, the shame, this insecurity, the depression that people like this experience. Remember, this is 2 to 3% of the population have some difference in sexual development. As a practicing physician, I have had patients who had this disorder, and I can tell you they suffer. These are human beings who don't fit in. And here we have a president that says they don't even exist. Either you're male or you're female, and otherwise you don't even exist. And your medical care is irrelevant, and whatever you think you are is irrelevant, and you don't get special medical care, and you can't have special doctors, and we're just going to disregard your condition and force you into one category or another. All right? Tell me now, what category, what do I do with the 19th patient at blind vaginal pouch and breast, but no other, there's no scrotum, but testicles? What do I do? Did I tell this patient she's female? Do I tell this patient that she's male? Do I make her be one or the other against her will? According to the intersex people, she's a male because she has testicles. She has no penis or scrotum. Do I make her be a female, even though she may not internally feel like a female, and she can't have a baby, and she doesn't have ovaries, and she's XY? Am I going to force her to be female? I want the people out there who believe what Trump has said to answer those questions. But more importantly, I want you to think about what it would be like for your child or for you if you were caught in this situation. Think about human rights. Do patients who are intersex, do patients who have differences in sexual development, gender dysphoria as a result, do they have human rights? Do they deserve to be discriminated against and treated do they deserve to be disenfranchised and disappeared and driven back into the woodwork where they always were? They were always there. This was written about 100 years ago. Doctors made these observations, but these patients were just ignored and treated badly. Do they have human rights? Do you believe in human rights? If you believe in human rights and you have any understanding of embryology, you can't continue this ridiculous notion, like Trump says, that there are just two genders. And this is why real estate developers who have no background in biology must not interfere with science and medicine and must not be telling science and medicine what to do. They are not qualified. He is not qualified. And this is really a violation of human rights. There's my commentary for today. Hope I woke everybody up.
Seems like you did. You wrote Rick Browser.
You mentioned some statistics, and the clearest incidence of intersex is when somebody is born with both, at least some semblance of a penis and a vagina. That happens in about 1 in 2,000 births. And that is undeniable. It's right there in everybody's face from birth, and that's very, very rare, but it's still hundreds of thousands of people in America. And then you go to the wider intersex, biological intersex, as opposed to where you've said 10 million. I looked at other estimates, but it's at least 6 million, which is double the number of Jews we have in the country. About the number it equals the number of Jews, double the number of Muslims. For every Muslim you have in the country, you have 2 people who are genetically intersex, which is not nothing. It's the size of one of our biggest cities. And to deny these people is to, it's not fair.
It's a violation of their human rights. Everyone has a right to exist. And now Jackie Green, I mentioned her earlier on Facebook. She has a post this morning where she talks about the history of this, and she brought up a really interesting thing. I want to go back and listen to it more carefully, but she talked about an article that was written by a doctor, 100 years ago or more, where he kept a catalog of this. He actually counted how many patients he saw who had these various so this is not something that just popped out of the air just recently. These patients have always existed, but the shame and the embarrassment that they just were kept underground. Their parents didn't talk about it. They must have decided that they're going to wear a dress or they're going to wear pants. But can you imagine what they went through? And I dare say that some of these people were physically abused as well. They must have been. Our cruelty, our lack of humanity to other human beings is our history. It's been our history all along. We've done this to people based on their skin color, on their ethnicity, on their religion, on their language, where they come from. And this is the same thing. Now we do this to people who have biological differences that through no fault of their own. We deny their existence, tell them they don't exist, they don't deserve. We're just writing them off as human beings and denying their human rights. This is a human rights violation. It derives from a politician inserting his nose in an area of science and medicine where he doesn't belong.
It's a winning issue for the Republicans. My feeling is, my feeling is, when Republicans want to get you worked up about trans issues, check your pocket, because they are picking your pocket. They're using this issue, which doesn't directly affect most Americans on a day-to-day basis, to get you riled up, to distract you from a lot of their terrible economic policies, like cutting back on Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security.
Yeah, they're definitely doing that. Hey, Dr.
Right,
Pat,
Mark.
really quickly, and
Hi, Mark.
Because you kind of mentioned it earlier, but from a religious standpoint, it's my understanding that some of these people that you're referring to and everything existed way back even in the biblical days and everything like that. And that doesn't matter whether you're talking about the Torah, which is the Jewish book, or the Quran, or the Bible, or a number of other religious books, but there are a number of times that they are referenced in the Bible and everything like that. So am I mistaken in that belief that there are a number of times that people that are cross-gender, or not cross-gender, but that have these various forms of both male and female are mentioned in these biblical books?
Well, I don't know that. I'm not much of a biblical scholar, but I can tell you biologically, this isn't a new problem. If they're here today, they've always been here. It's just like, we just because we just discovered it doesn't mean it didn't exist. Pluto was there before we discovered it as well. But my point, and this is not my area of medicine. Like I said, I do internal medicine and I do, infection control, but I have seen, and as a primary care doctor, I did have patients who had intersex states. And I can tell you, one of my patients who I'll never forget, I made the diagnosis. I followed him for 10 years. It so depressed him, he eventually basically drank himself to death. I know how these patients suffer. So my plea today is to reflect back on that which we must all share, our belief in human rights. We must all share that. And you're absolutely right, Rick. This is what the GOP is doing to rile up voters. I'm seeing stuff in my neighborhood, posters and things basically saying that, it's about DEI and trans surgery on children. DEI, they're really using the DEI and the trans thing to try to get votes. That's one area that the GOP has made a key strategy. Another one is repression of voting. They're doing it again. They're doing what was done many times since the Civil War, since the Reformation, putting in legislation to suppress voting for Black Americans and Latino Americans. They want to outlaw mail-in voting, and Trump talked the other day about putting ICE agents at polling stations. Now, if you know the history of voter suppression in this country, do you think that people are going to feel comfortable? Certain people, like Black Americans and Latino Americans in this day and age, are going to feel comfortable going to the polls if there's armed ICE agents standing there, scouring, scanning, and looking at them and demanding documents and so forth? No, that's voter intimidation. It's exactly what happened after the Civil Rights Act. It's exactly what happened after the Civil War and during the period of Reformation. We can't allow people who have voting rights to lose those voting rights. That's turning back the clock.
Yeah, that's definitely turning back.
There's a persistent myth used by conservatives about trans people. My conservative lunatic buddy says that trans is a mental issue, is a mental illness that makes you cut off your genitals. And the deal is, and as you probably know some of the stats, I've maybe more up-to-date stats, but there's top surgery, which is just doing something with your brain. That's easy surgery. Bottom surgery, more than 99% of trans people or even intersex people do not mess with their genitals, because that is brutal surgery. It's expensive. It takes long rehab. Most people who are in the trans or intersex area decide to leave it alone. And
yes, I can tell you. Now, I know a little bit about this, being a doctor. There is a specialty in urology. There are certain urologists who do reconstructive urological surgery, and they do this for many patients, not just for patients who have gender disorders or intersex states, but for patients who've had trauma to the genital area, motor vehicle accidents, gunshot wounds, or other congenital anatomical abnormalities. There is a specialty in urology called urological reconstruction. And those urologists have to have not only medical school and residency, they have to have a fellowship in urological reconstruction. It is very complicated surgery. I mean, you think about it, like having to restructure the urinary tract and the external genitalia. That's very rare, very complicated. It's not undertaken lightly. People don't say, I'm just going to have surgery. I'm going to change myself from a male to a female or vice versa. It's not that simple. That's a big deal. And it is very complicated surgery. And this isn't done just willy-nilly. And your friend who makes that statement, I would ask him, if he's so sure about this, what gender, what sex is the patient I described? What is that? Is that patient has testicles, but no penis or scrotum, a vagina and breasts, but no uterus or ovaries? What is that patient? Tell me, Mr. MAGA, is that a male or a female? And explain why.
They won't be able to answer that question.
You can't answer that question.
Yeah, and my mom, like I said, she was a head nurse at Tampa General Hospital. She saw these cases in the 40s, and she was telling me about it when I was growing up. And I said, "What?" She goes, "Well, they're like hermaphrodites. They have both organs." And I said, "Well, what do you do?" Back then, they and the family made a decision which way to go, and the medical doctors intervened. But this has been going
and that
on
was
for a long
often
time.
bad, because if they chose wrong, that kid grew up at odds with his or
this is medicine in 1945 to 1949. I mean, it was different what they did back then than they do today. But for the president to say there's only two sexes, that's just absolutely not true. But he's a real estate developer. He's a real estate salesman. So I don't get my medical advice from a real estate salesman either. I'm sorry. I just don't talk to them about.
Well, now a real estate developer and his cronies, who are fake physicians with fake credentials or wrong credentials, are now telling real doctors what to do. It's now become illegal to treat transgender patients in many locations. These doctors are at risk of being prosecuted. Texas, for example, it's illegal to practice this area of medicine. So those patients are having to be sent to other places, other centers for treatment. And that's just, I mean, that's an example of the violation of human rights. Imagine you have a medical disorder and the president of the United States says, you don't exist. You can't have that medical situation. You can't have this diagnosis and you can't get care. We're going to put your doctor in jail if they treat you. Is that not a violation of human rights?
But remember, he makes a statement like that: simple things for simple minds. So if you say male and female, it's simple minds can understand.
California has a logical, simple solution for trans athletes. Now, California has 40 million people. We have one competitive trans athlete. One, A.B. Fernandez. She just won, I think, the high school state championship in like the high jump or a couple track and field events. However, so for this one athlete who's trans, whatever she wins, they also give the medal to the runner-up who's not trans, right? They both. If she wins the gold medal, so does the cis athlete that she beat, which is seems like a completely, among, no solution's going to be ideal, but that seems reasonable. She's not.
It is a creative solution, and our solution is we have to go because World Edition is coming on the Pod TV network as we speak. So we'll see you next week on Medicine and Science, only on the Pod TV network.
Peace.
Take care. Bye-bye.